Well, US President Joe Biden has signed a legislation to ban TikTok, and a ban is almost certain unless the Chinese-based parent company sells the app to an approved buyer. So what exactly happens now, and is it the right move by the US President? Michael Fishwick, the CEO of Venetian Media Group, joins me now to discuss this. Michael, thanks for your time today. 170 million people use TikTok in the US, not to mention right around the rest of the world. The main concern, though, for President Biden is security, but President Biden himself uses TikTok for his campaign. How do you see this playing out?
It's a bit of a soap opera, I guess you could say. It's quite an amazing thought to consider that, the US government would consider banning a business on the provision that they believe it to be a security concern. I think, how does it all play out, particularly in an election year? It's going to be an interesting one to watch. The key thing here is that it's going to face significant legal challenges given the road that it is currently going down, in the sense that it's like comply or we ban. TikTok has certainly indicated that they'd rather take the ban than be forced to sell to an approved buyer. So I think it's going to face significant challenges. Number one, particularly on the basis of Americans and their first right amendment right. So I think it'll lead to a prolonged battle. I don't think anything's going to happen particularly this year. You mentioned before that President Biden, is an avid user of TikTok, particularly to target a younger audience that he's going to increasingly need to get to the polls to win the election. So I don't think anything's going to happen this year. I think next year you will see a prolonged battle. I find it really unlikely that there would be a ban. I think that would, even though it's not out of the question because it has happened in other markets. India, for example, has a pretty hard ban on TikTok. It's not allowed in the country, and most governments do have security concerns and therefore ban public servants using it. I think the most likely scenario that we will see is we'll see a prolonged battle over the next 12 to 18 months, and I think what you would hope to see is that there's probably an increased level of compliance that is put on TikTok, and particularly in relation to their data. But one could also argue too that there is a level of political posturing in here, and there's a variety of different arguments. But I would probably say that it's a prolonged battle, and a resolution comes where TikTok remains and just under a bit more scrutiny.
And also, as well, as you mentioned before, such a younger demographic on TikTok, you kind of need to be associated with the younger generation if you're going for a presidential campaign. How, though, will this impact creators or businesses that rely on social media as their income, I guess?
If there was a ban, I think it would be significant. The creator economy, I guess, as you could call it these days, it's sort of shifted from influencer to creator. But I think that would have a big impact on young creators. In America, in particular, they have a pretty significant creator fund where they're actually paid based on the amount of views that they generate, whereas I don't think we have that in Australia. But people are generating significant amounts of money through the platform now, whether it's through their new retail platform or just through the awareness that it generates, and therefore the sales that it can generate. But businesses, even in Australia too, and we're seeing this in our own agencies in Yakazoo and Frontier, that it's a terrific tool to generate significant amounts of awareness for not a lot of money on an organic level. So I think it would be an unpopular thing, given the popularity of the tool with a young demographic, with particularly a changing consumer segment as well. They're a much harder to engage audience than traditional media would elsewhere allow. So I think I don't think it would have too many positives for creators or businesses.
Michael, we do have to wrap things up shortly, but I want to get your thoughts on this. Back home in Australia, and we're talking about businesses here in Australia. I mean, they're facing a range of challenges at the moment, including hiring the right people and an uphill battle of additional costs. The list goes on, really. But also, I wanted to chat with you about payroll tax, specifically in Victoria. It has the lowest threshold for payroll tax. I mean, the government has recently increased this threshold, but with rising wages, it still means a lot of businesses are forcing out additional taxes and potentially forcing them out of business, or worst case scenario, not wanting to employ people. Are we supporting business owners appropriately in Australia, in your perspective?
I think a lot more could be done. You mentioned payroll tax. I think most business owners would sort of argue, what's the point of it, other than just to generate tax for the sake of tax? When we talk about supporting Australian business owners. The cost of employment is increasing, taxes are increasing. The only way that I really see that happening in any meaningful way is, significant tax reform to support particularly small business in Australia. Running a business is hard. All business owners would attest to that as well. So I think absolutely more could be done, and I think that would be in the form of significant tax reform.
Michael Fishwick, lovely to chat with you. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Thanks, Holly.